Don't forget to head over to We Are Sunderland and take advantage of our exciting launch offer. You can get 6 months of coverage available for just £1. Hi everyone, full time, Newcastle United 3, Sunderland 0. Paul, what's your reflection on that one, Joe?
I think Sunderland probably got what they deserved, and Newcastle got a win that, they could have scored more, couldn't they? It was a game which you could see within 5 minutes the way that it was going to go, the difference in quality between the two sides. Newcastle pressed Sunderland so high, and Sunderland just could not get out all afternoon. That ended up contributing to their own downfall, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but it was evident straight from the off. Newcastle, they had almost 4 attackers, 5 possibly, with Kieran Trippier pushing up as far as he did, and Sunderland just could not beat that first line of press. Newcastle, when the success that they've had under Eddie Howe has come in that sort of high press and the transition, and Sunderland couldn't deal with it today, and the gap between the two sides was unsure.
Yeah, that's something that Michael Beale's just reiterated full time. Look, there was a gap coming into the game, there was a gap at the end of it. We thought, there was, you've seen from Newcastle's display that there are ways to get at them, but I just think today, the occasion, Beale spoke about the experience that Newcastle have had playing in high octane environments. They've beaten PSG, they've beaten Chelsea. It's no disgrace losing to that side. Everybody knows the situation that Sunderland are in. I'll be honest, today from my point of view, I did think they lacked a bit of nous and on the pitch, just sort of all over the park. I thought Dan Neil, Alex Pritchard, probably 2 of the standout performers for me. Pritch more so in the second half. I thought he was quiet first half, but then again, Sunderland just struggled to get the ball into the better players. Jack Clarke had an off day, to say the least. He didn't really get into any areas to run at Trippier. When he did, I thought he dwindled on the ball too long. It was a day where Sunderland had far too many players who had off days.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. Again, that boils down to the quality in the end, the physicality and the intensity that Newcastle brought. Sunderland just couldn't deal with it. But like you say there, Jack Clarke, he's the one who, I think most of us would agree, he probably will be in the Premier League next season. But he's going to have to perform better than that if he's going to, be starting week in, week out in the Premier League next season, because he was dealt with comfortably all afternoon. Sunderland couldn't get the ball to him enough in the first place, and that was despite Kieran Trippier being so far forward the other side. But that was the problem for them throughout it. A few times that they did get the ball, they were trying to sort of play their way out of trouble, like how they get away with in the Championship. Joe Bellingham, one in particular, he got caught early a couple of times in the first sort of 15 minutes, which just set the tone. And Newcastle just did not allow Sunderland any time on the ball, and they couldn't get out of their own half, and that is the top and bottom of it. And it just felt like a matter of time. I do think Sunderland defended quite well, quite bravely. But when it's just wave after wave almost, or you're without the ball that much, you've got to work so hard in the pace that they had down the flanks. They were trying to get in behind quite quickly. With Bruno and Joe Linton pinging balls down to Gordon and Almiron, and it worked. And in the end, it told. They got in at half time at 1-0, which they're probably a little bit fortunate to do so, because they didn't even have a shot at goal. Talking about Clarke, I think he only had 10 or 12 touches in the first half, which kind of sums it up. The only little bit of joy they did get early on, they tested Dan Burn at left back once or twice. I think Naz Rousson got down that side, and Trey Hume won a couple of free kicks, but they couldn't really keep doing that.
It was strange that they didn't go, and as you say, they had 1 or 2 chances, didn't they? But after that, it just seemed to die a death. They lacked a real impetus. Now, I think you've got to give credit where credit's due. Newcastle were just better across the park today.
Absolutely. They tried to get the crowd going a little bit with a couple of tackles that you expect on a derby day, but once the game set into the pattern and you got that 15 minutes out the way, it was control for Newcastle, and they never really looked as though they were going to give that away, and particularly with the lead. Like I say, they got in at 1-0, Sunderland probably fortunate, and then within 30 seconds, whatever Michael Beale has said at half time is thrown out the window, and it is game over then. I'm still trying to work out what Pierre Ecker was trying to do. Obviously there was comment. There must have been a comment made for Sunderland to play short. We'd seen them being forced to go long from Anthony Patterson's goal kicks. They started off going short from the get-go in the second half, and straight away Ecker turned into trouble inside his own penalty area. Almiron nips in, unselfishly squares it at Isaac, and it's 2-0, and then it is game over. That takes anything out of the crowd as well, and then you're kind of wondering what sort of score this could be if Newcastle really went for the jugular. I think, if we're being honest, I think Newcastle stepped off a little bit. I think they eased off their intensity a little bit, Sunderland did get a little bit of a foothold then because of that. Dan Neil was able to thread a couple of balls through. Alex Pritchard, you mentioned them two being the two who come away from this with a, you don't want to say it intact because you've got to understand the difference between the two teams, but they were the two who looked better equipped to go up against the Premier League side. Pritchard clipped the top of the bar and he forced a save from Martin Bravka as well, and that was about it really. There was just nothing really going forward for Sunderland.
Yeah, that was something that Beale spoke about, the message at half time. He says he made a few changes to get them further up the pitch. Again, I'm with you. What was it, Sunderland getting further up the pitch, or did Newcastle sort of step off, take their foot off the gas a bit? It was, it's hard, isn't it? That Beale said they were the clear winner on the day, and it's unfortunate, isn't it, for fans, because that's not how you want the day to go. But I think just from speaking to supporters beforehand, they knew they knew they weren't favourites coming into this game, and it would have been a huge upset if they were able to do that. I mean, again, Beale was asked in his post-match press conference there, how do they move forward, and he said that's the most important thing is, right, this game's done. They've got to be optimistic because they are still in the playoffs. This game's got no bearing on the league, but it's where they want to get to. They're the type of opposition who you're going to come up against week in, week out.
Yeah, and I think that on that evidence, that will probably be the worry, because you kind of think Sunderland aren't far away in the Championship. We've seen Leeds come here, we've seen West Brom come here, we've seen Southampton come here, and they've won all of those games and done well in those games. But that was just a completely different level, and if you want to get to that level, I think it might tell a few supporters and a few people within the club that the journey is a little bit longer than what they might have thought it was. But I think what was interesting as well, you spoke about the fans at the end in this place. You're 3-0 down to your rivals. There was still quite a lot of people left in the ground, and they applauded them off, which doesn't happen very often if you're 3-0 down against your rivals. They were applauded and cheered off, which kind of tells you that I think the majority of fans still back this young group of players. The model and the strategy going forward is something that will be brought into question if they can't kick on and get into the Premier League. But for the time being, I think the fans are still on side with it, and today, like you said, I think everyone kind of knew what was going to come. It was more sort of hope rather than expectation that it wouldn't.
Yeah, I think Beale, again, just the final point really. Beale said there that they're not going to move away from how they want to play. They said if what they were doing with bringing in young players was easy, everybody would be doing it. But it's at the minute that they're in the playoffs in the Championship, it's standing them in good stead. It's not been an issue. The club spent 4 years in League One. I think it's just important again to take stock of where the club's been. It wasn't the best display. Everyone knows today there was far too many players had off days, and Newcastle didn't have an off day. That's realistically the way that Sunderland were going to win that.
It's the inexperience as well, isn't it, for a big game like this? There's only really Alex Pritchard on that pitch who can you'd class as one who's experienced in a game like this, and that's him not having experienced this game in particular, and that is kind of where Sunderland are at, and that is where they'll bridge that gap. That's where you've got to think that there might be a little bit of leeway in the structure of how they bring in recruitment. I think Michael Beale will have learned a lot himself today as well. I think he might look back at the decision to stick to the principle of playing out from the back and ask why, because there's teams in, as you mentioned at the start of this video, there's teams in the Premier League and in the Champions League who have struggled to deal with Newcastle trying to do that, and teams who are, without being disrespectful, have better quality than at the back than players that Sunderland have with the ball at the feet. So that will be something that he might look back at and think, should we have tried to adapt another way? I know that if when they were going along in the first half it was coming back, but is there an in-between? Could they change the system or something like that? That's something that he will look back. And he said it in the midweek before the game, didn't he, that the feedback from this game is going to be the most important thing, whichever way the game went. And I guess we'll find that out over the coming weeks, but it doesn't get any easier because you've got to go to Ipswich next week, which is a really tough game off the back of a derby defeat, which fans might have not expected much, but it's still losing 3-0 at home to your rivals, and it's going to hurt and it's going to sting for some time, and you've got to get back on the horse in the Championship at a really tough place to go next week. Yeah, definitely. It's all about Sunderland's reaction from here moving forward. If you want more reaction, you can join us over on We Are Sunderland. We'll be taking a deep dive, tactical look at the game, what went wrong. We'll have the full reaction from Michael Beale, full press conference analysis, and we'll catch you on later in the week.